Okay, here, set this up. All right. All right, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and do this for you. I have the question list of questions that were for us to keep in mind as we're doing our talk. So I'll go through those. That will tell you quite a bit about me. I have a couple stories. We'll do a tour of my wood shop. I'll show you my drying room briefly, and then at the end I'll show you a couple of my pieces of work that I do, and I'll explain them or answer any questions you may have. Okay, so what inspired you to take up wood turning? What inspired me to take up wood turning is, well, before my wood turning life, I had a workplace injury. I was a printer. I worked in a printing plant, in a printing factory on big rotary printing presses. So I had an accident at work where a faulty hydraulic crane system that my company neglected to maintain dropped a 1,600-pound print cylinder on me, across my lower back, shattered my lower back. I was basically paralyzed and I had to learn to walk again. So in doing so, in my time of mourning, I went back to wood carving because as a young child, I used to carve with my grandfather. My grandfather is really my inspiration behind anything wood, got me really into woodworking, wood carving, stuff like that. So I needed a pastime to keep my mind off mourning for my injury and my loss at the time, because I wasn't sure if I would walk again. So I went back to wood carving. I put a drop cloth across my chest and I would carve canes, whimsical houses, farm animals, a wide variety of things, just wishing and hoping that my feet would move again. Once my feet started moving again, I continued with the carving. I had very extensive physiotherapy for about 4 years before I could walk with a walker. Once I could walk with a cane, I wanted something that I could do at my own pace that I could possibly make a living at or make a buck at. So I looked up wood turning because it was an interest of mine. Anything wood, furniture making, carving, anything wood is really of interest to me. So I looked up on Google. I found a local woodworking club that had a full woodworking shop at his disposal. It's a membership-based club. You pay a membership to join the club, to use the equipment, and to also get classes and courses at cost of the materials. So I joined that club and I took a wood turning 101 class with a fellow by Dennis Lalonde who taught that class at the time. I took that class, and since I wasn't working because I was so severely injured and I was still going through physiotherapy, I had time to practice. So I was there almost every day I could. As long as I wasn't in too much pain and my sleep pattern wasn't interrupted by my pain levels, I was there every day, practicing, honing, my tool control, my techniques, the presentation of the tools to the wood. So I excelled a little quickly, I like to think. Also, whenever there's a whole bunch of wood turning guilds up here. So whenever we had someone from the States, the UK, Australia, a wood turner come over here, he would always be asked to come to the wood turning guilds to do a demonstration. And I was always right there with my pen and pad, taking notes, learning, so I could take some of his techniques, meld them into my own style, and create my own style. Also, when they do that, they usually offer hands-on classes. So I would always pay the money to take the one-day class hands-on. So I've taken the one-day hands-on class with Michael Hoslock, Michael Gibson, Cynthia Gibson for wood burning, Warren Carpenter for live edge work, Cindy Drozda, Betty Scorpino for platters and off-center, and Barbara Dill for off-center work. I've also gone over to Ireland and taken the master's class course with Glenn Lucas in a weekend. And I also took a 2-day class with a fellow by the name of Seamus Cassidy. So, and then in between all that, I just keep learning, keep honing, and sort of trying to perfect my wood turning skills. That is how I got into wood turning. How long have I been wood turning for? I've been wood turning for 9 years now. The first year was a hobby. I took a full year to practice and really sort of master my techniques. And then second year, it became a full-time job for me. So full-time, I've been turning for 8 years. Altogether, I've been turning 9 years. How did I learn to turn? I joined a wood turning club, took a class, and any chance I got, I took classes with any well-known wood turners I could. Who inspires me now? Back in the day when I first started, I was inspired by Mike Mahoney, Glenn Lucas, Cindy Drozda, Michael Hoslock. Now I'm really inspired by everybody and everybody's work, because we all have different styles. We all have different techniques. There's many ways to skin a cat and everyone does it differently. So we're constantly learning in this field. It's great. And everybody inspires me. Seeing work, seeing their work on Facebook. I'm also really inspired by nature, forms in nature, such as flowers, buds, cocoons, different shapes that animals might make. But I'm also inspired by architecture, the medieval Gothic architecture of Europe, also the Asian architecture of Japan, Shanghai, Tokyo. So I find my inspiration sort of everywhere. What do I like to turn? I like to turn pretty much everything. I do a bit of hobby turning. I do a bit of production turning. I sort of try and dabble in it all. So for furniture companies, I'll do production turning for banister railings, table legs, drawer pulls. I've also done production turning for fondue skewers for a couple restaurant chains, make hundreds at a time. And I also do custom work. I do a lot of custom work where I sit down with the clients and we map out exactly what they want. So I do heirloom items, I do keepsake boxes and urns that want to be personalized by the person or with memorabilia from the person. I do heirloom turnings, which is a tree they would have on their property, which has some sort of significance to them. It comes down, they supply me with the wood, and I create heirloom turnings for however many generations they would like. Also, I do a lot of live edge turning. I really love doing anything live edge, any irregular shaped, and off-center multi-axis turning as well. I don't really do a lot of coloring or dyeing yet, but I am starting to get intrigued and starting to play with that because I was inspired by Phil Irons and Gary Lowe for their coloring and finishing. So I'm sort of starting to try and play with that. I do a lot of custom canes that are personalized for the people. So the handles are turned off center. The spindles are turned between centers. And usually they're embellished in some sort of way, whether they are wood burned, hand carved, textured, embellished, inlaid with things of significance, like maybe a ring or a diamond from a great grandmother. I have done custom work of bells, a lady who collects bells. She wanted a call bell, which her mom used to call them into the farmhouse for dinner. I've done many custom work. You can see those on my social media pages. So my web page is kadebolger.com. It's going to be released soon. I'm in the works of that. But if you go to that, it reroutes you to all my social media. So my Instagram page is K Carvings. My Facebook page is Kade's Custom Canes and Carvings, which is custom work, carvings, and wood turning. I also do furniture restoration and restoring time to time, but for the most part, wood turning is my full-time occupation. I love turning. I love just having the shavings fly through the air, and it's like you're in a rainstorm, dancing in the rain, so to speak. It's very relaxing. What other techniques do I use to combine in my wood turning? I use pyrography to wood burn images, names, stencils, animals, to texture and embellish work as well. I also do carving to texture and embellish work, or if you wanted like a rabbit or an animal or on the side of something, that would be possible. I have a friend who has a laser engraving, so I'm able to personalize everything. My laser engraver does my engraving for free because whenever he needs help, whether it be finishing, furniture, wood turning, I'll tutor him for free because he does all my, it's a good barter system we have. I also use inlaying. So I have done work with brass and aluminum. I sort of started trying that technique probably 6-7 months ago before I sort of knew anyone has tried to mix aluminum or soft metals in their work. Yeah, I like inlaying shells. I like inlaying colored stones, aluminum, brass, bronze, soft metals that can be returned. And I love embellishing. I do a lot of boxes, ornamental, decorative, jewelry boxes. So in my boxes, I like using different woods for the color contrast rather than dyeing. So I would use an exotic wood for, say, the finial, a different wood for the base, or a combination of 2 or 3 to give you the color contrast in the piece. I just love turning anything and everything, and I'll turn anything that'll make me money. So, but for the most part, anything live edge and custom work. Here we are. Do I convert my own timber? Yes, I do convert my own timber. I also buy kiln dried timber. Of course, it depends on the job. Here, we can't really go to a lumber yard and buy a log in log form. So anything live edge, crotches, irregular work, bowls that I may turn wet and I don't worry about warping, that wood is log form I get from arborists. I will get that, I will season it, I will store it, and I will mill it to what I need it for. If I need stuff that needs to be, like for boxes, for instance, or uniform salad bowls that need to be solid, not warp and not rock on the table, I would buy my timber and I would use kiln dried wood, so it would minimize the movement in any of those crucial pieces where you need to do connections or you need something that's not going to warp or move. Here we are. What is my favorite lathe? I think I've tried them all. I'm not sure if I've tried them all yet, but I've tried the Generals, the Vic Marks, the Robust, the Sweet 16, the American Beauty, The Axministers, the Powermatics, the Jets, the Deltas, the Generals in the stubby. I've used all those lathes. Is there any others that I didn't mention that I need to go out and try? Let me know. But in one-ways, I've tried one-ways. I really like one-ways, also because I like to support local. So I do have a one-way. It's probably my favorite lathe. My first lathe I started with was a General VS Plus, which I will show you later. And you'll also get a peek at my big one-way. So I like the one-way the best, but I mean, any lathe that turns wood, I'll use. I think my next lathe that I might add to my workshop will be maybe a Laguna. They're fairly reasonable. Or a Vicmark. I do like a Vicmark too. So that's the lathe. Do I teach and do I demo? Yes, I do both. I teach at the, well, the woodworking club where I learned wood turning. 3 years after I took that class, the instructor of that class asked me to help him in teaching that class. A year after that, he retired, so now I teach all the wood turning classes for the Durham Woodworking Club in Oshawa, which is the town over. I'm also an instructor and teacher for the Wood Turning Guild of Ontario. I do teach privately here in my shop, and I also teach at other people's shop if they have machinery and they would rather learn on their own machinery. I will bring what I need and I will teach you on your own equipment. Demoing. I also do demoing. I have demoed for several guilds across Ontario, the Kawartha Wood Turning Guilds, the Wood Turning Guild of Ontario, the Durham Woodworking Club, the Toronto Wood Turning Guild, the Brampton Wood Turning Guild, Burlington Wood Turning Guild, and the Niagara Golden Horseshoe Wood Turning Guild. I have done demos for. I have done 4 or 5 different demos for those clubs. One is my finishing technique. One is live edge bowl turning, both regular and thin walled. One is box turning. And one is crotch end grain turning versus side grain turning. And yeah, I'm also coming up with a few more I'm going to do. I'm getting set up for the interactive remote demos as well. So I have gotten all my equipment in the mail through Amazon and whatnot. This week I will be setting it up, and I have a friend coming over who worked for one of the TV stations, so he'll be able to get me up to speed fairly quickly on that equipment. So I look forward to doing interactive remote demos as well. Unfortunately, due to COVID, all the club demos, all the teaching classes and everything had to be on hold so far, but I'm anxiously waiting to get back to Lee Valley to teach classes and privately in my own shop and at the different woodworking clubs and guilds. I've also been, I also went to a private school in Toronto, an all-boys school. They had a compassion project where the boys wanted to make a specific project, and these 2 guys were really into baseball and they wanted to make baseball bats, regulation baseball bats. So the school hired me in to come in for 3-day sessions. The first day session was safety, tool control, practice sticks, practice cuts, the whole 9 yards. The second day we got into their baseball bat. And the third day we finished their baseball bat and we discussed finishing and how to decorate it if they choose to. Okay, so that was fun. I look forward to do that more as well. Is this a full-time occupation? Yes, it is a full-time occupation for me. How and where do I sell my work? Well, I sell my work in a couple galleries in Ontario. I sell my work at a couple gift shops in Ontario where we have tourism. And I also do probably 14 festivals, a year, where I travel around Ontario. I set up shop and I sell my work either in a art and craft festival, an art festival, an art exhibition, or a music and folk festival. So I do those during the summer. And also sell online through my Facebook page, web page, and Instagram. I get lots of commissions through there as well. Okay. Where would you like your turning to go in the future? Like anyone, I guess I would like to be just a little more well-known, maybe asked to demo here and there. I'm willing to travel to demo once we're allowed to. And I'm also setting up for the interactive remote demos too. So I look forward to that. I also look forward to, I do many things. I do the less expensive items that people who might not be able to afford the art pieces can still support my business. So I do price points, all price points across the board, just so no one's left out, really. And it's still money. It's still money in my pocket. So, yeah, I'd like to be in a couple more galleries. I'd like to have maybe a bigger area. We're looking at moving eventually to a bigger house where I can have a garage. Right now, my basement is in my basement. I will explain that once I get to the shop tour. So yeah, I look forward to a bigger space with a bigger garage where I can have many more lathes and many more students. I would love to have a setup similar to Nick Agar and Glenn Lucas. Oh, I forgot. I also took a class with Nick Agar on his Viking bowl and the airbrushing and texturing and using the sorbet texturing tool. So wherever I can, I love to learn. So that's about it for about me. Is there any questions about that part of the tour or the questions I answered?
No questions so far, Kate.
No questions so far? Okay. So here we'll get into my shop tour. First, I'll show you this. Here, I'll move this over here because I have that light right above me, the only light in the room. So this is my entrance into my workshop. I live in a basement. Well, no, I don't live in a basement. I live in a semi-detached townhome. If I could, I'd live down here and just turn all day, all night, but my wife wouldn't like that. So, yeah, I don't have the luxury of a huge garage. So my workshop is 1/3 of my basement. The other 2/3 is wood storage. And in behind this wall is my finishing area. So, yeah, so what I did in my basement with my shop is I framed in 1/3 of the area. So this space in here is probably 15 feet by 10 feet, which is my big room with my big lathe. I also have a smaller tent room right here with my smaller lathe. I will show you that later. But what I did here was, here, I'll put you down here on this table. What I did here is I wanted to frame the room in because I wanted to minimize any dust going in my furnace or throughout my house. So what I did here, I framed in walls with 2x6s. And in between the joists, I created shelving for storage. I wanted the shelves to be in the wall because I didn't want to lose another 6 inches protruding out of the wall. So I would lose more space in my wood shop. So I have spaces in certain parts of the wall where shelves can go, because when I originally made this wall, I didn't know exactly how big every shelf would want to be. I just knew I wanted to organize my tools, my chucks, finishes, different pieces of wood, drill bits, all that stuff in the wall so they're out of the way, organized, and easy to find. This wall is all vapor barriered, sealed, caulked, so it is, I like to seem to think it's airtight, but I do get a little bit of dust in there, but not nearly as much as if I didn't have that. Okay. I also have this tarp system that falls down in front of my walls, because every time I turn the lathe on, I don't want to have to be constantly dusting and cleaning those shelves. It would just be far more time consuming. I can use that time better for something else, for milling up wood, for drop-offs, deliveries, all that other stuff. So that's why I have the tarp system. Right here I have all my wood turning tools. Up here I have my skews, my parting tools. Here I have all my bowl gouges. I have a mixture of bowl gouges. So I have some Thompson tools, some Simon Hope handles with bowl gouges. I have some that I've made myself. I have some Diamit, some Hamlet, a mixture of all kinds of tools. They all seem to work well for me. So, and then down here, smaller spindle tools, detail gouges, very thin kerf parting tool I made with an industrial bandsaw blade, scrapers. Here's my Simon Hope hollowing tools, easy wood hollowing tools. I don't really use carbides much. I'm more of a traditional tool kind of guy, but I mean, it does have a purpose with end grain hollowing or hollow forms or urns, stuff like that. Or bowling balls. Bowling balls, carbides work great for bowling balls. I'll show you one later. Okay. Over here, I have my chuck wall. I have a whole bunch of Banksia pods because I got intrigued and I like doing boxes out of Banksia pods. I'll show you one later. There's another one on my webpage, but it sold as soon as I posted it, so I don't have that one anymore. Down here I have a couple blanks. Oh, here. I have a couple turning blanks. Here's a couple pieces of wood that I dyed myself using different aniline dyes. And I just dyed the blanks. I'm going to use them for small decorative ornamental engagement boxes or jewelry ring boxes. Okay. Over here I have more storage. I have my double-sided tape, my hand planes, my jack planes for when I'm doing furniture restoration or refinishing. Here I have all my sandpapers. Right here is all my dovetail saws, crosscut saws, fine tooth saws, draw knives, right angle clamps for doing square urns. And you see this side, sorry, I'll slow down a bit. Actually, I can put you right there on the bandsaw. And these tarps are great. I pull them up, grab what I want, I let them drop, and they fall right back in place. Down here I have some exotic wood blanks. I have some rosewoods, some African blackwood, some dyed stabilized burls, knife blanks, some Shacked Vega, Purple Heart, a small little organizer here for all drill bits and small components, hardware and whatnot. And then over here, just a tool rest with a bunch of hand tools that I don't use too often, but I don't want to lose. Right here beside my bandsaw, this is my bed extension for my one-way. So that brings my 36-inch between centers. This brings it up to 38 inches between centers. so I can do just a little bit longer table legs or banister railing legs. I can also attach that to the outboard, and I do outboard turning with that. I have an extra banjo, and I would do outboard turning on the outboard part of my lathe. The biggest thing I've ever turned on my outboard lathe is a 4-foot diameter bowl that was 1.5 feet deep. That was for a Japanese buckwheat noodle chef in Burlington. He needed a big bowl to knead his dough and mix his buckwheat dough for his noodles every morning. That bowl, when I mounted that on the lathe, it weighed more than me. I mean, I weigh 185, 190 maybe. That piece of wood, laminated and glued up, it weighed over 200 pounds. And when I was done, it weighed 13 kilograms. So about 27-ish pounds, so to speak. So he wanted it heavy that it wouldn't walk on him. In behind us here, I have my big bandsaw. This is a King Canada 2-speed bandsaw, 17 inch, so I can cut up to 17-inch logs or 17 wide boards. I have the fence and everything on it. Here, I'll switch this camera around so I can see what I'm looking at here. Am I going slow enough? No one's getting sick?
Yeah, all good so far, Kate.
Okay. So here I have my bandsaw. There I have my little air scrubber right here. So at the end of every day, that gets set on my bedway, and it cleans and scrubs the dust that's in the air, minimizing anything that gets out into my basement or upstairs. To the right of my bandsaw here, I have my grinding system. Oh, I gotta find where my camera is here. Yeah, it's backwards. So here's my grinder. It's a Delta variable speed grinder. I have CBN wheels on it. It's got a 120 wheel here and an 220 grit wheel for my fine wheel. And I have an 80 grit wheel for the reshaping and grinding other tools. Underneath my grinder, I have my drill that I use for sanding and hand drilling, sanding irregular shaped bowls. I have a bunch of blocks over here that are for jam chucks, pressure chucks. These guys, those tape measures, you ever put it somewhere and you can't find it? I hate doing that. Do it all the time. So I have probably 5 of them scattered around my little workshop. So if I misplace one, I always know where the next one is. Let me see. Over here in that corner, I just have a couple of rough turned live edge wing bowls. I brought these down from my drying room thinking I would have time to sand them, but I just haven't had time yet to sand these. So I'll eventually get to them. I have many, many more upstairs. It's sort of my stock for all my gift shops, galleries, and the 14 shows I do a year probably. Over here, this shelf has all my warranties, all my chuck boxes, all my drive centers, live centers. Down here, I have my wheels for my one-way if I ever need to move it or wheel it around the shop. Some carving tools. These are some theca pods, batel nuts, tagua nuts, and uxie nuts. I use them for miniatures, miniature boxes, miniature bowls, miniature goblets, but I also use them for inlays. This tower pillar over here, that holds all my hardware for all my pens, bottle stoppers, drills, pepper mills, all the mechanical parts and hardware. Up here, there's a bunch of scrap pieces. I keep the plain Jane woods I would usually dye or stain in a certain way, but these are all my finial wood. I also have a little scrap bin here, some a little longer, smaller pieces, a couple tagua nuts and uxie nuts for inlays and finials. And then in this tower, I have all my exotic woods, all my acrylics, and all those smaller acrylics and exotic woods that I use for finials, sorry. Right here is my one-way. This is my one-way 2436. It has a 3-horsepower motor. I had 48 indexing wheel on it. I got the extra, so it's up to 96 indexing, 3-horsepower motor. I got the stainless steel bedway, which, because I do a lot of wet wood. I have this emergency stop that can be set anywhere I need it. And I also have this that can be on sort of either side of me as I see fit. I have this banjo with the tool rest. I also have an additional banjo because it's a lot easier to do deep hollow forms when you have two tool rests to rest your tool on. You have 2 points of contact rather than one where it acts like a teeter-totter, so to speak. So I use 2 banjos for the very deep hollowing, but also my second banjo and all my outboard attachments go here. I would have to scoot it over a little bit though, just to give me a little bit of room to work in that area. This is great. I love this little feature. See this little light here? I ordered it on Amazon. Comes with a little remote control. They all have rare earth magnets on them, so I can keep them together. But this is perfect. I can turn it on. That is at 50%. I can then click 100%, and I can see very well in any hollow form, any box, or any urn that I do. I bought those, geez, probably a month ago. I charged it. I use it almost every day, and I haven't had to charge it yet again. Over here, oh, look, there's another tape measure for when I can never find that tape measure wherever I put it last. Back here, I have my tailstock swinger. This thing is great because I can bring my tailstock all the way here. Sorry, I'll put you back here. I can bring my tailstock all the way to the swinger. And lock it back here. And I can just swing this away from me. That way, I'm never going to hit my elbow on that lovely point we all love to hit. It's back in place, pin it, and I'm good to go again with tailstock support. Here's my little work table. It's not much of a work table. It was an IKEA special that was a coffee table. We got a better coffee table, so this came downstairs. This moves around the shop where I need it. It usually holds the projects that I'm working on that day, as well as the tools that I'm using that day. I would start the day by picking the tools I need to use, sharpen them all. If I'm doing a big bowl day, I would probably sharpen 3 or 4 bowl gouges. That way I wouldn't have to stop and sharpen in between. I would just be able to bang off 15 bowls in a day or so, okay? I'll switch the camera around here again to the front view. Come on. There we go. And then in behind here, I have a smaller tent. This holds my smaller lathe, my very first lathe. Just need a drink quick. All right. And I'll switch you around again here. Perfect. Here's my small little tent. This tent is 4x4 with a reflective interior. These bags are a whole bunch of blanks of wood, live edge pieces of wood that I'm gonna turn into live edge cups and bowls. They have a little bit of moisture still in them, so I wanted to keep them in bags to prevent checking and cracking before I get to them. So I'm actually gonna turn, in those 3 bags total, there's probably 22 pieces, 22 live edge cups or small bowls. They will all be turned tomorrow. This is my very first lathe. This is a General VS Plus. This lathe I bought probably 9 years ago. I use it for all my small work, my finials. You can see it's taped up here. I taped it up because I usually do my brass and aluminum and copper, all my metal turning in here on this lathe now. These are LED strip bars that give me light. I have a CFM fan up here that brings in fresh air for me to breathe. Back here, I have a dust collector that takes away all my bad air. So if I want to keep everything contained in this small tent, I can zip myself up inside it. I have good air coming in, bad air going out, and of course I would wear a full respirator, being trapped in a closed environment with dust. This little bench is a whole bunch of scraps. I made this bench with a whole bunch of scraps I had lying around my mom's house. So the tabletop is actually the bench of an old piano. Those piano hinges are from the old piano. All that plywood is from a planter box that was in my backyard. The legs, you can see the first 2 are, they are fence post legs. And the 2 legs at the back were actually the, my old bed frame legs. And those 2 little drawer pulls were one of my very first turnings on that lathe. That cabinet holds all the hardware, chucks, everything for my little General lathe. I have a fan to keep me cool, as it can get quite hot in there. And I have this tarp system, so if I'm not working in there, it just falls down and keeps all my dust in this small area for me to easily clean. Yeah, that's the right one. It's about 28 bucks on Amazon. I think you get 2 of them. So I haven't even had a chance to use the second one. It's charged, it's ready, but the first one's been charged for probably 3 weeks so far. So that's a good buy for that bang. That great bang for your buck. Now in behind this tarp, I have a little grommet that it sticks up there. This would stay open when I have students. I will do all my teaching and demoing on my lathe. My student will use my original lathe. They have to show me that they're able to use my lathe properly and not stick a tool into the spur drive or the chuck before they can ever step foot close to this lathe. I wouldn't be so mad if that got dinged, but if this did, I would be quite choked. So my small lathe, this was the first one I ever bought, but this was actually what funded my big lathe. With this lathe, I made a whole bunch of items. I would sell them at craft shows. I would throw a percentage away in savings. I would throw a percentage towards tools and material, and I would have a small percentage to eat or play with. After about 7 years, I had enough to buy this beast with all the attachments, bells and whistles I wanted, and I was only out a few $1,000s. So that lathe with all the bells and whistles is about $16,000. In behind this tarp here, I have my drilling station. I have a small Ryobi drill press, and I have a small sander. It's a 3-foot belt, 4 inches wide, a 5-inch disc. I use that for small sanding jobs. Here's my drill press, but really what I use this room for is a comfortable chair, and I use my Dremel on a flex shaft. I use this for texturing, embellishing work, power carving pieces, piercing. I also do wood burning and pyrography. I do that on the couch when my wife's at work. In the corner is my dust collector. A little bit of wood storage here. Some sapele. These two are Brazilian cherry. Those were a couple cane orders I had to do. Well, that's leftover from a couple cane orders I had to do. So that's my small little Dremel sanding drilling area and my dust collector. So that's my small lathe room. But I built this wall in an L shape because I wanted to make it as hard as possible for the dust to get around into the furnace. So we would have to go through the tarp system, through the vapor barriers, around 3 corners to get into the furnace, minimizing a lot of dust that gets into my house. Okay. Oh, up here I have my clamps, my face shields. Students always have to wear face shields. I wear them when I'm working here alone. I only don't wear them when I'm doing demos so people can hear me without an echo. Here I have some miniature turning tools for my miniatures, my small sorbet texturing tool, the larger sorbet texturing tool, and a clock that doesn't work so I don't have to rely on time. I just wait for the yell that dinner's ready. So as we go through my little doorway here, you can see my wall. I built shelving in the whole side of the wall for more storage. So here I have more clamps. Here I have wood storage. Some of these are the building materials that built my wall. So I have extra material to create extra shelves. This is my Gary Sanders light system for my one-way lathe. I just haven't had time to set it up yet, but I get by without it so far. On this shelf, I have my angle grinder, my hammer drill, angle grinder, and jigsaw. Down here I have an encyclopedia of handyman. So if you ever need to fix your house or do something, I have some draw knives. Down here I have all my stains, spirit stains, dyes, lacquers, spray paints, varathanes, polys, all my stains that I use in my restoration and refinishing. Also, if people want a specific tint or color on their turned piece, I can do that here as well. Down here I have sandpaper. I have a square oscillating sander. This is my smaller handheld Dremel that doesn't have a flex shaft. And these are just some old brown sandwich bags. Believe it or not, it acts as a very high sandpaper, like 1000 grit sandpaper, to buff and burnish your pieces. As we go further along this wall, up here I have all my stains, my dyes, chestnut stains. Here I have some inlay material. These are walrus tusks, some deer antlers, some cow bones. Then I have some other aniline dyes powdered. Some you can buy mixed, some I have mixed myself. As we go down this wall, this shelf has like my chainsaw oil, bar oil, a couple hand tools, scalpels for carving. That just happened, the funnel and the piece of soapstone just happened to drop there for now. Underneath that, I have my chainsaw area. So here at the top is my Sawzall or reciprocating saw, all my bits. Here's my chainsaws. Here, hold on, there we go. Here's my chainsaws. They're built right into the wall. So they just sit in there nicely. Nicely out of the way, nicely stored out of the way, bar oil. Down here I have my plunge routers, couple routers, and a socket set. As we go further along this wall, these are shotgun patches. Shotgun patches are what I apply my finishes with. These are what you use to clean the insides of your that's what you use to clean the inside of the barrel of your gun. It's a interwoven cotton, similar to a t-shirt, so there's no lint, fluff, or dust that comes off of those rags. They're very reasonable. I buy those on Amazon. Here is my glues, adhesives, epoxies. Up here I have some more glues, adhesives, epoxies. Here's a lubricant for my bearings on my bandsaw if need be. This is an ebonizing solution. The ebonizing solution is apple cider vinegar and triple lot steel wool. It reacts with the tannins in the wood to ebonize your wood. Up here I have all my finishes. I have some Osmo oil, some tung oil, some wood hardener, acetone, linseed oil diluted 1:1. That's sort of my first go-to coat. Allow it to dry, and then I do sort of a tung oil, teak oil, Danish oil type finish. There's acetone. Up here I have strippers. The strippers I use to remove the finish and the stains and the dyes from wood when I'm refinishing. And then here's a couple Danish oils, walnut oil, tung oil, and antique oil I use for finishing. Similar to Harvey, he uses a Minwax product. The antique oil, I use the Minwax tung oil. It's getting harder to find, so I'm gonna test out the Waco brand as well. Okay. Over here, it's kind of a cluttered mess, but that is one rack of wood storage. Believe it or not, I know where everything is. Exotic wood in a certain area, dried wood in a certain area, but I have a storage unit. I also have a storage unit that that stores a lot of my logs in log form, and another storage unit that holds my table saw, a bandsaw, my jointer, my planer, my oscillating sander, wood shaper, router table, all that stuff for furniture, restoration and refinishing. I use that equipment at that location. Okay. That's it for my shop. I'll show you my drying room. My drying room is upstairs. And then right after that, I can show you a couple pieces of my finished work. Any questions? Just need a drink of water quick.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions for you, Kate. Let me whiz back up through the chat and I'll find them.
Oh, okay.
What about your dyed blanks? Are they surface dyed or is it dyed all through under? And do you use pressure or a vacuum to dye them?
Those I didn't use a pressure or a vacuum to dye. Those ones I sort of had the spirit stains in a sealed ice cream container, and I put the wood in the dye solution and I left it in there for a few days so the dye saturated fully through those small blanks with no pressure.
Okay, thanks. Another question about your one-way. How did you get it up on the wheels?
Oh, the one-way?
Yep.
The one-way comes with a, I can show you quick. The one-way comes with a little anchor, sort of like a crowbar that you would lift. You would lift the one end of the lathe, and then as it's lifted, you bolt the wheels to the side and then it's able to be moved. So right here is my little jack. I'll just switch around the camera. So here is my little jack for jacking up my one-way. This goes under here. Lift it, jack it up. And then you bolt the wheels to here or here. Bolt the wheels right to here. The lathe is lifted off the floor, probably 4 inches. And then the wheels sit on the pavement so I can wheel it around my shop and move it if I need to. These little jacks come with your one-way. Comes with all your one-ways so you can move it around the shop. I don't have it bolted to the floor. So if I put something on that's really out of round, my lathe will move slightly or rock. So of course I lower the speed so it's not shaking and walking across the floor, but I really just jack it up to move it back where it needs to be. And how did I get it in the basement? It was in pieces and assembled in the basement.
Imagine that's still got some fairly heavy pieces, even if it's in bits, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, all together with all the attachments, that lathe is 800 kilos.
Yeah.
Or so, around there with everything I got added on. So here is my spare room, which is also my drying room. But it's also my reptile snake room because I also breed snakes. So this room is heat and humidity controlled. It houses 4 pythons and 3 boas. I breed them and I sell them to pet stores and I sell them privately. Over here is my drying area. So this room is heat and humidity controlled. In the summer, it will get up to probably 30 degrees with maybe a 15–20% humidity. In the winter, this room will be about 15 degrees and it will have a percentage of probably 5 humidity. So in our Canadian long cold winters, that is usually when I'm sanding and finishing all my dried bowls for all my upcoming festivals, shows, galleries, and little gift shops at the tourist hotspots. Okay, as you can see, most of them are live edge. A wide variety of different species of wood. I don't twice turn my bowls. I don't want to wait half my life for wood to dry just to return it. I turn my bowls to the final wall thickness. I don't really care if it warps, twists, shifts. I find that adds character. And then I just sand it and finish it, and then it's ready to go wherever it has to go. Okay. This is a live edge cake stand. I finished. I'm just waiting to deliver to the lady. It's for her wedding, but there has been delays on deliveries and stuff due to COVID. When I talked about refinishing and restoration, these are 2 walnut Windsor chairs. I have been commissioned to refinish these, restore these, and refinish these. The problem with these chairs is, if we look underneath, you can see all these spindles. She moved to France and she left these chairs in the care of friends. And what their friend's dog did was chew the heck out of all these spindles. So she asked me to restore and refinish that. So that's a project in the very near future. That's it for my drying room and reptile room. The snake breeding is more of a hobby because I love the reptiles, and it's just another added revenue for another side business, so to speak. Okay. So that's it for the drying room. And if your grandkids ever need a snake or you're interested, I can hook you up. It's only like a 2-day mail order worldwide. All right, so over here, I have any questions before I show a couple pieces of work?
Yeah. What have you got any tips for keeping the bark on the live edge work?
Yes. What I usually do is I turn them to the final thickness. Usually they're a 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch. But after seeing some of Colwyn, the demo Colwyn did, he did a demo on a live edge piece that was 1.5 millimeters thick, wall thickness. Right after that demo, I was inspired to turn thinner. I thought 1/8 of an inch and was fairly thin, but so I turned a whole bunch of 1.5 millimeter wall thickness live edge forms, probably about 25 that week. I was so inspired. Of course, they're not the same. They're all different cuts, different woods, different grain patterns. They're just turned to 1.5 millimeter thick. To keep the bark on, what I do is when you turn the live edge bowl, you turn halfway up the side. And then when you're turning the bark, you don't want to keep coming up the side and out that bark edge because you're going to push the bark right off of that edge. You go halfway up the live edge bowl, and then you start at the rim and you come back to blend the bottom. That way the tool is pushing the bark to keep it on that cambium layer. Also, anything live edge and log form, I always acquire my wood in the winter months because the sap isn't running freely. In the summer, if you cut down logs and try to keep it in log form, the sap is running very freely through the tree. So the first thing that separates is the bark. So that is an issue with getting summer cut wood versus winter cut wood. Winter cut wood will also come flying off if you don't use the proper technique turning it. The bark will come flying off and it will probably hit you in the face shield. Hope we're all wearing face shields when we turn live edge work. So also what I do, sort of an insurance premium, after I have turned that piece, I would then take a thin super glue. Let me see if I have one here. A thin super glue. So this is a very thin viscosity super glue. It moves very freely into cracks in between the cambium layers into the bark. So once I have turned the piece, finished it, sanded the piece, finished the piece, before I put it upstairs to dry for a couple days, I take the super glue I take this super glue, and I have a bowl here I can sort of show you. And what I do is I take the super glue and I go along that bark cambium layer, making sure that the bark gets adhered to that cambium layer and it doesn't come off. Some people may ask or think in solidifying the bark to that cambium layer, it might crack or warp. The key there is consistent wall thickness. And the thinner you go, the less stress on the bark to have it pop off. Okay. Did that answer the question well?
Yes, I think it did, thanks.
Okay. All right, so here's a couple pieces of my work. I did go through old photos and I had pictures of stuff that I was gonna share, but then I think I might have too much stuff. So anything else you would like to see, you can see on my webpage, kadebolger.com, my Instagram, K Carvings, or my Facebook page, Kade's Custom Canes and Carvings. And I'm always uploading new work. I'll just switch the camera around here and we'll go through a few pieces. So I do uniform bowls, I do salad bowls, I do a bit of everything, but I really love boxes and live edge. So here is a piece of quilted maple. This piece has a live edge. I'll just move the camera a little closer here. There we go. We have a live edge here on this side. We have a bark inclusion at the top and goes through the bottom of the bowl. And it is shiny as anything. I love having a shine. I believe a shine creates waterproofness in many, 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 many coats. I have acquired the nickname over time, Mr. Shiny. They call me Mr. Shiny at all the wood turning guilds I'm part of, because if I can't quite see myself in it to shave in it, it needs one more coat. Here's a big platter I did. This piece is Brazilian, redwood burl from the redwood forest in California. This was a platter I did. I wanted to really showcase the wood. How I sign my name is with my wood burner. All my stuff is labeled to the species of the wood, signed and numbered. That number tells me where the wood is from, when it was cut, when it was made, the size and dimensions of that piece, okay, and the price. So this was a redwood burl. Right here, this is a pine burl, and this was in one of the galleries for the longest time. I called this piece Elephant. Can you see the elephant in it? It would sit like this on your table. The thickness is about an eighth of an eighth-inch wall thickness. It tapers to a thicker bottom, probably a 1/4 inch, so it's not so tippy. And I called it elephant because this way it looks like an elephant ear. This way it looks like a baby elephant. There's his eye. Here's his trunk, but his trunk is maybe buried in the water or something. So that's why that piece is called elephant. And that was a piece of garbage wood I found. It was a piece of pine burl, and I wasn't really sure I would turn it because I was always told always use hardwoods. But I'm glad I did use that piece. I really like turning crotch pieces, which give you an irregular shape. This piece is a ash crotch. You can see the 2 branches and the feathering in between the crotch. But on the rim, this is wood burned using my wood burning pyrography razor tip wood burner. And in doing so, there we go. When you hit the light, it's a whole bunch of dots. It's almost like stipple dots you might have done in school, where you use a whole bunch of dots to create a scenery. That is a whole bunch of dots. Can anyone guess how many dots are around the circumference of that bowl? I actually counted because it's a conversation piece in the galleries and at my shows. Believe it or not, there's 2,556 dots around the full circumference of that, that rim. And in doing the stippling and so many dots, when the light hits it, it shines like a disco ball. It's almost like diamonds. This is a Coolabah burl from Australia. Here's a red Molly burl, live edge from Australia. This piece I called Butterfly. Almost looks like a butterfly. And this piece was called Implosion. It's almost like a explosion or an implosion. It's imploding on itself, so to speak. There was an exhibition a few years back. No, not a few years back. Last year, there was an exhibition at the Markham Art Gallery. It was the 7 Wonders of the World art exhibition. So they asked a few local artists around the area if they could recreate one of these 7 Wonders of the World. So I had a toss-up between the Great Wall of China and the Taj Mahal. I wanted a challenge, so I went with the Great Wall of China. This piece was turned on the lathe. It was then cut apart, laminated back together, carved, textured, hidden with a hammer in a couple places so it looked like it's been hit with arrows and cannonballs to create the Great Wall of China. There's over 60 hours in that piece, and I love doing it. It was fun. I turned it, glued it together, and I glued it so I would get that angulation of the rolling hills of China that the Great Wall of China is so famous for. This piece, some of you people might have seen this piece. This piece is called Le Feu, which is the fire. In 2018, I attended the AWGB symposium, and I entered 2 boxes into the gallery, and this piece was chosen for the traveling circuit of their roadshow. So I look forward to seeing it again at the next AAW symposium. I will be there again this year, as long as it's going on. I hope it will be. Okay, what does everybody think this is made out of? I made a reference to it a little while ago when I'm using carbide tips are the right thing for the job. This is a bowling ball. This is a 5-pin bowling ball. It was turned, I put it on the lathe, I got it centered. I just did a shear scrape because I didn't want to change the outside curve of the bowling ball. I just wanted to create a flat surface so it would sit flat and an area for my tenon. This stuff is hard stuff. I tried using conventional tools, and the moment I touched it, I would get one cut and it would be duller than a doorknob. So I had to switch to carbides. I mean, it's a rubber, it's sand, it's acrylic, it's plastic, it's hard on your tools. So the carbides were the right tool for the job. That was sanded. That was sanded up to 800 grit sandpaper. And then on top of it, I used a jeweler's rouge, which is what carvers use to strop and hone their carving knives. So I have probably another 6 of these the in-laws gave me to turn. Okay. Now I'll show you some of my boxes. My boxes, I love doing boxes. Here's one spectacular one. This piece is called Sweet Orange. This piece is one piece. It's a box. It was turned on the lathe, and then it was dyed with the orange spirit stain. I'll move it over a bit. Yep. That's just a plain old Jane piece of maple. Pretty boring without any color, but with a little bit of color, it really livens it up. Here's another box I did. Here, let me see. Yep. There we go. Here's another box I did. This piece is an old skateboard laminated together. The base and the lid, or no, the base here and the finial are African blackwood. And it's a box. This piece, I started playing with colors and dyes after seeing some of the guys color and dye their work. This piece I called Spire. The top piece is inspired by a spire on top of an old medieval castle. Also, the shape of the box would have been similar to a tower or the top of one of the Archer towers. The base is ambrosia maple. So those staining and coloring is caused by the ambrosia beetle. It was stained red. The finial is made out of emerald ash. It was dyed with a crimson red just to make it pop a little brighter than the lighter shade of red for the base of the box. I also use acrylics and plastics. So here's a little box. This again is skateboards laminated together. And the finial is an aqua acrylic pen blank I used for the finial. I've been working with a lot of aluminum and brass. I made this piece probably 6 months ago before I even knew anyone who did aluminum work in their wood turning. So that was also inspirational seeing his work. The name just accidentally lapsed from me. So sorry, but thank you for the inspiration. I started playing with aluminums probably 6 months ago, turning it and inlaying it. So this piece is Purple Heart. The aluminum is solid all the way through. And the lid is solid Purple Heart with an aluminum finial. The aluminum is turned using conventional tools. High-speed steel. And there's that box. I had a really big, I was really contemplating if I wanted that stripe to go through the lid too, but then later I thought it would be a bit too much. So I decided to only have the stripe on the base and a nice finial on top to accent one another. Here's a Banksia pod. This piece I made, I was inspired by the horror that all the Australians were going through, and it was inspiring that they all came together to overcome the hardship of all these wildfires. So I wanted to create a box using materials native to Australia. So this is a Banksia pod box, and the color and the finial are she oak. This piece I left a matte finish. I really hemmed and hawed about going shiny because a lot of my work is predominantly shiny, but this piece I felt it looked much better with a semi-matte finish, and it would be a headache to get a nice finish in all those holes without any of it running on me. Here's another box. This box is Saturn. This piece is made out of, the body is made out of ironwood, which is hornbeam. The ring is made out of black walnut. And the lid pole, or the little spike on top, is made out of African red mahogany. At first, I was going to put this piece sitting flat, but I thought, no, I'll sit it off center because it really gives it movement. It's almost like it moves through, it's moving in orbit, so to speak. So, and that's a box. The aluminum inlays I do. Here's a piece of maple. This shape was inspired by Asian architecture. On the lid, you can see aluminum inlay indexed. And the finial is Kade Bolger. All the boxes are about 1/8 wall thickness. I have done some at a 1/16, which is 1.5 millimeter. This piece I called La Flamme, which is the fire, female version. This piece is walnut and ash, and this piece was inspired by the old oil lamps my grandmother had and my aunt had in the farmhouse. They had these old oil lamps. I said earlier I like using different woods or exotic woods to give color contrast. So here is a piece I did. The base is Purple Heart. The body is Wenge, and the finial is Shact Vega. And this box is sort of a bell style box. Here you can really see the grain in the Wenge. And a Purple Heart base. I also do some hollow forms. Here's a hollow form I did a while back. I just got around to posting it. This is turned 1.5, no, the wall thickness on this piece is 2 millimeters, and the base is 3 millimeters, just to give it a little bit of weight on the bottom. So it's not top heavy, but on this piece I did again the aluminum inlay. I said I also like using pyrography and wood burning. So here is a box I did. In the growth rings of the box, I accentuated with pyrography, and I used my stippling technique, which is probably hundreds of dots. This is ambrosia maple. So you see these spots, that's the ambrosia part from the ambrosia beetle. Ambrosia beetle. And then on this side, I just did the 3 growth rings to give it some elegance. The burning also follows the grain on the inside. So it's on both outside and inside. And I love doing off-center work. So I'll show these at the same time. These are 2 triangular off-center boxes. So I'll show this guy first. This guy I did off-center to create the triangle, but then I did off-center so the finial came back this way when I did the lid. And when I did the base, I had the base tilt this way so the lid tilted this way. So when you look at it there, it tilts one way. When you look at it here, it tilts another way. And when you look at it here, it tilts yet another way away from you. So the leaning tower of triangular box, I guess. I can't remember what I named that one. This piece is a piece of quilted silver maple. I turned triangular on the lathe. I gave it the separation where the lid connects to the top because I was inspired by Asian architecture for that shape. And then the finial was turned off center on 5 different axes. And I got so into the turning multi-access boxes, I did the triangles, I did the cube, I did the pentagon, I did the hexagon, the heptagon, the octagon, the nonagon, and a decagon. I went all the way up to a 10-sided multi-access box. These are both made out of cherry. This finial is purple lilac bush, and this finial is apple from your local apple orchard. And that is, oh, one thing I've been starting to try and just play around with was a little bit of coloring and dyeing. This was inspired by Gary Lowe, and I didn't do it using his technique with iridescent paints or airbrushes or saran wrap. This was done using sponges. So I cut a whole bunch of sponges to a whole bunch of different shapes. I used a base color, and then I went over top with the sponges to create that sort of earth camouflage effect on that bowl. The paint is regular black stain, or the black rim is black paint stain. So, and then here's, this is the last one. These are a couple pieces of mulberry. These I sort of turned this week. I do a lot of these. Live edge dishes, cups, bowls, vases. So that's mulberry. One of them is destined for the mother-in-law because they gave me the tree. So I just got to pick out the best one for mom. So that's it for the gallery. I could keep going, but I don't want anyone to go to sleep. I do have quite a bit of stock because I ramp up for shows and festivals and galleries and gift shops and stuff like that.
Got a few more questions for you, Kade.
Oh, okay.
One of them is, what's your secret to get the best shine on your pieces?
The best shine, I do sort of a French polish technique using curing oils. So first few coats I apply very liberal. Coat the surface, cover it. It's going to absorb it like a sponge. And then after that, once it's got a good base, I will sand off any fluff, lint, or dust that's on the surface with probably a 400 grit and then a 600 grit. And then I will start applying thin coats of the oil until I'm happy with the shine. I like using oils because I can do any sort of amount of semi-gloss, semi-matte, matte, gloss, high gloss, glass finish. You can really control the finish that you want. And if it is a little bit too shiny, you can always cut it back with, say, some micro mesh. Yeah.
Thanks. Couple more.
Yep.
There were a couple of others about the finishing, but I think you've answered them all with what you just said. What adhesive did you use on the aluminium and wood box?
Pardon?
What adhesive what glue did you use on the aluminium and wood?
The aluminum box I did, I used epoxy.
Okay.
I think it's G6 epoxy. Let me see, I have one downstairs I can show you in a block. And I could show you the epoxy too. Oh. Oh no, it's G2 epoxy. System 3, G2 epoxy. I'll just switch around my camera quick here. This is the epoxy I used. It held up very well. Of course, you can't be too aggressive and get the metal too hot because it will separate. Heat up the wood, it will expand and it will separate from the glue, but just slow and steady. And here's one that I have glued up. Yep.
Another question for you: do you use any cutting compounds or lubricants when you're cutting the aluminium?
Sorry, I missed that. Just my little air dust collector down there.
Okay. Yeah, when you're cutting the aluminium wood, do you use any cutting compounds or lubricants?
I used engine oil.
Okay.
Engine oil to lubricate my drill bit. And then once I had a hole in the center, I didn't lubricate at all. I just used carbide tips.
So you turn it generally with carbide rather than high-speed steel, do you?
Pardon?
What, you turn the aluminium generally with carbide rather than high-speed steel, do you?
The inside I used carbides, but the whole outside I used conventional wood turning tools, high-speed Sheffield tools.
Okay.
And when I turned the finial, I just used high-speed steel tools.
Right. Okay. Do you roughen the aluminium surface to key it for gluing, or just glue it as it is?
I roughed it slightly, just by hand, a light scuff with 80 grit sandpaper, roughly.
Okay. Rick suggested you try moly slip to lubricate the aluminium.
Oh, okay. Poly slip.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to write that down, look it up. And you would lubricate the wood and the aluminum before you touch it with the tool?
Hang on a minute. I'll.
Oh, just the tool tip of the carbide.
Just change the settings on the chat so you can unmute yourself if you want. Rick, do you want to unmute and just explain what you mean, how you use the moly slip?
Yeah, it was Rick who I saw did the aluminum work, wasn't it?
Rick got cut off earlier, but I use this stuff as well, Kade. I use Rocol RTD compound.
I just gotta, let me see, roll call.
Yeah, it's back to front, but.
Now what is it exactly? It's just RTD compound? Okay.
Yeah, it's a metal cutting lubricant, which is meant to double your tool life.
Oh, okay.
I think that the moly slip that Rick uses is pretty much the same stuff.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't
Oh, it's
But
breaking
yes,
up.
molly slip, I use that for my aluminium turning demos, and it just preserves your cutting edge. So I can turn a full spindle for a goblet, for example. Don't need to go back to the sharpening. It can preserve the cutting edge on high-speed steel, and that just stops the aluminium welding itself onto the cutting edge. So just
Oh
dip it
yeah.
in from time to time, and it keeps it nice and sharp. Just one
Okay, and
second.
would you put that lubricant on the finial or the stem of the goblet first while you're turning it, or to the tip of the tool, and it will transfer to the piece as it's cutting?
Sorry, Kay, just went to grab a piece. So that's a piece.
I gotta find you here. Let me see.
Hang on a minute, I'll just spotlight it so it'll be.
Okay.
Yeah. So aluminium stem there. It's turned from, I think it was 20 mil aluminium bar. And I can turn a full one of those with just one sharp tool to start off with. I don't have to go back to the grinder, and then
Okay.
just finish it with
That's nice.
the Rhino Grit abrasive, and then some metal polish. So I sand it down to about 1200 grit, and then just polish it with a bit of metal polish. But that's just with one trip to the sharpening system.
Oh, cool. Okay. Thanks. Thanks. That looks good.
I'll try and find a link for the cutting compound. I'll just add it onto the posting.
Was it turned with a gouge or a scraper? The
Spindle
aluminum
gouge.
finial. Yeah, I used a detail gouge.
Yeah, just a spindle gouge, and it's fine.
Yeah.
Parting tool on the tenons where I join it with the lid and the base, but then just normal spindle gouge.
Yeah, that's exactly how I did it too. I found it, so you get tiny little chips when you're using the parting tool, but when you rode the bevel and you used the spindle gouge, you got nice little curly springs coming off the tool.
Yeah.
So,
I'll find the link to that compound for you.
okay, thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Another question for you, Kay. Do you use sanding sealer before you oil your pieces?
No, I usually don't use sanding sealer. I usually, once I've turned the piece, I'll blow it off, get all the dust and sawdust out of the grain. I will sand the piece up to the grit or the finish I'm looking for on that specific piece. I would then blow it out again with the air compressor, and then sometimes I would apply the linseed oil diluted 50-50 with a mineral spirits first, just so it penetrates. I find it gives the wood a good, deep, rich color. And then once that's dry, I start doing my oil finishes. So I guess I'm using a diluted linseed oil, almost like a sanding sealer, so to speak. Some pieces I do use that same solution to do wet sanding. So it's an oil mineral spirit mixture goes on the wood, and I wet sand the wood too. It gives me a good finish.
Right. Yeah, I turned a few other metals on the lathe as well. I did some bronze a little while ago. I needed to make some bronze bolts because I wanted to make them look like antique, like blacksmith nails. So I turned the bronze. It's a bit hard, but I managed to do it with my high-speed steel turning tools. It worked okay. It took me a while, but I got there.
Okay. Yeah, the bronze is much harder than the brass.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And they're both harder than the aluminium.
The right sort of brass is fairly easy to turn. I've turned a bit of brass in the past for like candle holders and things like that. But yeah, the bronze is definitely a lot tougher than the brass was.
I've only got the brass and the aluminium so far.
Yeah.
I haven't tried bronze. I've done copper, but and pewter.
Yeah.
Kate, I've just posted a link to the Molly Slip site there. So it's the Molly Slip MCC that I use.
Oh, okay, perfect. I can copy it.
Yeah.
Copy the link. Roll call. Do you use paraffin to turn the brass? No, I haven't used any paraffin waxes to turn metals, but it sounds like you can use it as a lubricant, I guess.
Yes,
So
you
I might
can,
have to
but
try that.
yeah, I think there are grades of brass that are designed for machining, and those I think turn fairly well without any lubrication anyway.
Yeah.
I think there was a
Yeah.
time when actually paraffin was used as a lubricant itself, not as a wax, but paraffin. But modern health and safety is, I think, it has a dim view on that now.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a petro product, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have healed wood with petro or the paraffin wax before, but I don't really do that anymore because one time I was boiling paraffin wax on the oven to seal a whole bunch of stuff. All of a sudden I had to go to the bathroom. I came back from going to the bathroom and there was a small fire in the pot. So I don't do that anymore.
Okay, you said about French polishing. Do you use shellac at all?
No, I haven't used shellac much. I have heard some people do an initial first 1 or 2 coats of shellac and then the finish of their desire over top. But no, I don't really use shellac because I don't find it's as durable or as long lasting as some of the other hardening finishes. Even on the furniture, I restore and refinish. I still sort of tend to lean away from shellacs because if someone put a water bottle or a whiskey glass or something with condensation or alcohol spilt on it, I would have to refinish it again.
You can charge again for it then.
Yeah, it would be constantly coming back, yeah.
Any other questions for Kade? No, I think we've run out of questions. So yeah, thanks very much for doing that, Kade. It was an interesting evening, seeing your workshop and your work and what you do. So yeah, it's great.
Thanks. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.